Well, we know one criminal in Tennessee who did not escape death row is Christa Pike, the only woman set to be put to death right now in our state for a brutal murder she was convicted of carrying out when she was just 18.
Teenagers are known to be playfully energetic, resilient, emotional, confident, and bursting with a lot of optimism. However, sometimes teenagers can be rebellious, and without the proper guidance at this crucial stage in their lives, they can become a threat to themselves and to those around them. Today, I will take you through some of the most dangerous kids in America, their heinous crimes, and how they now find themselves on death row. Austin Gregory Myers.
I have brothers and sisters myself. I can only imagine what it would be like to lose one of them.
In the heartland of Ohio, a young man named Austin Myers found himself thrust into the spotlight as the state's youngest death row inmate. But what led to this extreme punishment? Born and raised in the quiet town of Waynesville, Ohio, Austin seemed like an ordinary teenager, blending into the fabric of his community. But beneath the surface, a darker side was lurking. Austin Myers grew up in a modest home, surrounded by a loving family. His parents, John and Lisa Myers, worked hard to provide for their son, instilling in him the values of honesty and hard work. However, as Austin entered his teenage years, he began to drift down a dangerous path. Friends and acquaintances describe Austin as a troubled young man, often getting involved in petty crimes and engaging in risky behavior. It was during this time that he crossed paths with Timothy Mosley, a fellow troubled soul who would become his partner in crime. Together, Austin and Timothy formed a bond fueled by a shared fascination with violence and a desire for excitement. They found solace in each other's company, their friendship taking a dark turn as they delved deeper into a world of drugs and criminal activities. As their friendship grew, so did their appetite for danger. They began to hatch a plan that would forever change the course of their lives and the lives of those around them. Their target? Justin Back, a young acquaintance who unknowingly became entangled in their web of darkness. The events that unfolded on that fateful night would shock the community of Waynesville to its core and leave a lasting scar on the hearts of all who knew Justin. But what drove Austin Myers and Timothy Mosley to commit such a heinous act? It was a cold winter night on January 28, 2014, when Austin Myers and Timothy Mosley set their plan into motion. Their target, Justin Back, was lured to a remote location, a farmhouse on Clark County Line Road, under the pretense of a friendly gathering. Little did Justin know that he was walking into a trap from which he would never escape. As Justin arrived at the farmhouse, he was met by Austin and Timothy, who had prepared themselves for the gruesome act they were about to commit. What followed was a night of unimaginable horror, as Austin and Timothy unleashed their pent-up rage and violence upon their unsuspecting victim. Armed with a knife, a gun, and even a pair of bolt cutters, Austin and Timothy subjected Justin to a brutal and sadistic assault. The details of the murder are too gruesome to fully comprehend, as they repeatedly stabbed and beat Justin, leaving him defenseless and at their mercy. The motive behind this heinous act remains a haunting question. Some speculate that Austin and Timothy intended to steal money and drugs from Justin, while others believe it was a twisted display of power and dominance. Whatever the motive, the level of violence inflicted upon Justin was beyond comprehension. After the murder, Austin and Timothy attempted to dispose of Justin's body, dismembering him and placing his remains in plastic bags. Their plan was to bury him in a nearby field, but fate had other plans. Justin's father became concerned about his son's whereabouts and arrived at the farmhouse, interrupting Austin and Timothy's gruesome task. The discovery of the crime shocked the small community of Waynesville. The police launched an immediate investigation, and it didn't take long for them to connect Austin and Timothy to the murder. Both were swiftly arrested and charged with aggravated murder, aggravated robbery, and other related offenses. The evidence against Austin and Timothy was overwhelming. DNA evidence, witness testimonies, and the recovery of the murder weapons left no doubt about their guilt. However, as the trial unfolded, it became clear that Austin Myers would face a fate far more severe, even though it was Timothy who actually used the knife to murder Justin. Throughout the trial, Austin Myers maintained his innocence, claiming that he was coerced and manipulated by Timothy Mosley. However, the jury saw through his defense and deemed Austin the mastermind behind the plot, manipulating Timothy into carrying out the gruesome act. His role as the primary instigator and the severity of his actions weighed heavily on the jury's decision. Ultimately, Austin Myers was sentenced to death, making him the youngest person on Ohio's death row. While Timothy Mosley was equally guilty, his show of remorse and decision to opt for a plea deal earned him a sentence of life in prison without the possibility of parole. The decision to impose the death penalty on Austin sparked a nationwide debate about the fairness and effectiveness of such a punishment, particularly for someone so young. Advocates argued that his age and the influence of Timothy Mosley should have been taken into consideration, while others believed that the severity of the crime warranted the harshest penalty. Justin's parents have certainly not hidden their feelings regarding the verdict and feel it was totally deserved. Following the ruling, Sandy Cates, Justin's mother, had this to say about Austin. He had a choice. Justin didn't have a choice. He could have stopped it. He could have called 911. He could have stepped in. He could have helped save Justin, but he didn't. Again, that was his choice. As Austin Myers sits on death row, his fate remains uncertain. Meanwhile, appeals and legal battles continue to unfold, with supporters and opponents of the death penalty closely watching the developments. The case of Austin Myers serves as a chilling reminder of the consequences one faces for committing such heinous acts. Jaa Williams. This next story highlights the dark side of teenage motherhood and uncovers the nerve-wracking details of how a young mom's secret pregnancy took a terrifying turn. Jaa Williams, a 17-year-old high school student, managed to hide her pregnancy from her family and friends with remarkable precision. She carefully concealed her growing belly by strategically choosing loose-fitting clothes and avoiding situations where her secret might be revealed. Her family had no inkling that she was carrying a child, and Jaa was determined to keep it that way until the very end. Throughout her pregnancy, Jaa lived in constant fear of discovery. She isolated herself from social activities, avoiding any situations that might expose her secret. She became an expert at deflecting questions about her changing body, often attributing it to weight gain or bloating. Her ability to maintain this facade was astonishing, as she navigated the halls of her high school with a growing secret hidden beneath her clothes. As her due date approached, Jaa's anxiety reached new heights. She had no support system in place and no one to turn to for guidance or assistance. The weight of her secret became unbearable, and she found herself consumed by fear and desperation. It was in this state of mind that she made a decision that would forever alter the course of her life. On that fateful day, Jaa went into labor alone in her bedroom. Overwhelmed by a mixture of pain, fear, and panic, she found herself facing an impossible choice. In her mind, she believed that she had no other option but to take matters into her own hands. The details of what transpired next are haunting and difficult to comprehend. With trembling hands, Jaa delivered her baby boy. Instead of experiencing the joy and wonder that often accompanies childbirth, she was consumed by a sense of dread and desperation. In the depths of her despair, she made the unthinkable decision to end the life of her own child. It was a moment of unimaginable darkness, a choice that would forever haunt her. After committing this egregious act, Jaa wrapped the lifeless body of her baby in a blanket and placed him in a bag. She knew that she had to dispose of the evidence, to erase any trace of her crime. In a state of shock and disbelief, she made her way to a local dumpster, where she callously discarded the bag containing her deceased newborn. Little did Jaa know that her actions would soon be discovered, setting in motion a chain of events that would expose the truth and send shockwaves through the community. Somehow, Jaa's family discovered she had just delivered a child and sought to retrieve the child from her. Instead of owning up to her despicable crime, Jaa chose to lie to her family by claiming she had handed the baby to a red-haired hospital worker at the Southeast Health Medical Center. However, when Jaa's family got to the hospital, they refuted her story and immediately alerted the police about the confusing situation. On questioning, the Dothan Police Department found Jaa's responses lacking. Investigators then proceeded to review the hospital's surveillance and found no evidence that Jaa had visited the hospital on the day in question. This raised suspicions about Jaa's story and led investigators to probe her further to unravel the truth. That was when she made the revelation that shocked everyone, including her family. According to the police, she confessed to wrapping the baby in a blanket and then leaving him inside a local dumpster with a trash compactor at an apartment complex in the area. The police wasted no time in launching a thorough investigation into the circumstances surrounding the baby's death and the role Jaa played in it. They meticulously combed through the dumpster where the baby's body was found, collecting any potential evidence that could shed light on the case. Every piece of information was crucial in building a solid case against the teenage mother. Meanwhile, news of the discovery spread like wildfire throughout the community. Shock and disbelief gripped the hearts of those who had known Jaa, leaving them questioning how such a tragedy could occur. Friends, classmates, and neighbors struggled to reconcile the image they had of Jaa with the horrifying reality reality that was unfolding. It soon became apparent that Jaa had gone to great lengths to conceal her pregnancy. Friends and classmates recalled her sudden withdrawal from social activities and her avoidance of situations where her secret might be exposed. The picture that emerged was one of a young girl burdened by fear and desperation, navigating the complexities of teenage motherhood alone. The evidence against Jaa continued to mount, leaving little doubt in the minds of the investigators. They discovered text messages and online searches that hinted at her struggle with the pregnancy and her ultimate decision to take matters into her own hands. It was a chilling revelation, painting a picture of a young girl trapped in a web of secrecy and despair. Finally, the authorities felt they had gathered enough evidence to make an arrest. Jaa Williams was taken into custody, and her life was forever changed by the consequences of her alleged actions.
Even given the circumstances of this horrible crime, they did their jobs and they did it well, and that's why we're standing in front of you today.
As the legal process began, the prosecution made it clear that they would seek the harshest penalty for Jaa. They argued that her actions demonstrated a complete disregard for human life and made her a danger to society, particularly to children. On Wednesday, February 21, 2024, a Houston County grand jury indicted Jaa of one count of capital murder in the death of her baby boy. It remains to be seen if she would eventually get the death penalty, which has been proposed by the prosecution. Brenda Spencer.
That's not how I am or who I am. And how it was presented, it made me look like that.
Brenda is a dangerous teenage killer who hates Mondays, so she decides to shoot up a school to make the day more fun. This is the story of Brenda Spencer. Before Brenda Spencer became known as the teenage school shooter who forever changed the course of history, her early years were marked by a turbulent upbringing and a series of troubling events. Born on April 3, 1962, in San Diego, California, Brenda Ann Spencer grew up in a household plagued by poverty and instability. Her father, Wallace Spencer, played a significant role in shaping her troubled path. Wallace, an avid gun collector, introduced Brenda to the world of firearms at a young age. Their shared interest in guns would later become a haunting aspect of Brenda's life. But it wasn't just her fascination with weapons that set her apart. Brenda's reputation as a problem child began to take shape as she struggled with numerous health issues and engaged in risky behaviors. All of these meant that Brenda's attendance at school was sporadic at best. However, when she did show up, her presence was often met with raised eyebrows. Just a week before the infamous shooting that would make her a household name, Brenda allegedly made an eerie statement to her classmates. She declared that she was planning to do something big to get on TV. Little did anyone know the horrifying truth behind those words. As a teenager, Brenda Spencer's life was marred by drug use and petty theft. She frequently found herself entangled in a web of delinquency, drawing attention from authorities and raising concerns among those who knew her. But behind her rebellious facade, there were deeper issues at play. Brenda would later claim that her father's abusive behavior and her mother's absence had a profound impact on her mental well-being. She felt trapped in a world of turmoil with no escape in sight. The walls of her home were filled with empty whiskey bottles, a grim reflection of the chaos that consumed her life. Standing at just 5'2" tall and weighing a mere 89 pounds, Brenda Spencer may have seemed too small to be a threat. But beneath her seemingly unassuming exterior lay a troubled soul, yearning for attention and relief from the pain that plagued her. It was within the walls of Grover Cleveland Elementary School in San Diego that Brenda's troubled past would collide with a horrifying present. On that fateful day, January 29, 1979, the lives of innocent children and educators would be forever changed. That morning started like any other at Grover Cleveland Elementary School in San Diego, California. Children lined up outside, eagerly awaiting the opening of the school gates. But little did they know that this seemingly ordinary day would soon turn into a nightmare. Across the street, in a house filled with empty whiskey bottles and a single mattress, Brenda Ann Spencer watched the children from her window. She had chosen to skip school that day, and a sense of darkness loomed over her. Brenda had washed down her epilepsy medication with alcohol, a dangerous combination that would further cloud her troubled mind. As the children lined up outside the school gates, Brenda reached for the .22 semi-automatic rifle that had been a Christmas gift from her father. With a chilling determination in her eyes, Brenda aimed the rifle out of the window and began firing at the unsuspecting children. Panic and chaos erupted as the sound of gunshots filled the air. The school's principal, Burton Ragg, was one of the first victims of Brenda's deadly rampage. He was struck down by a bullet, his life cut short in an instant. As the children scattered in fear, a custodian named Michael Suchard bravely stepped in to protect them. Michael attempted to pull a student to safety, but tragically he too fell victim to Brenda's bullets. His selfless act of bravery will forever be remembered. Miraculously, none of the children lost their lives that day, but 8 of them were injured by Brenda's gunfire. The innocent victims, caught in the crossfire of a troubled teenager's rage, would carry the physical and emotional scars for the rest of their lives. As the shots rang out, the police were called to the scene. It didn't take long for them to realize that the source of the gunfire was Brenda's house. Negotiators were dispatched to try and reason with her, to bring an end to the senseless violence. But Brenda had no intention of surrendering easily. She barricaded herself inside her home, warning the authorities that she was still armed and ready to come out shooting if they forced her to leave. The standoff lasted for over 6 agonizing hours. Brenda remained defiant, refusing to cooperate with the negotiators. Inside her home, she was a ticking time bomb, her troubled mind pushing her further into darkness. It was during this tense standoff that Brenda gave her infamous interview with the San Diego Union-Tribune over the phone. Her words would forever be etched into the annals of history. "I don't like Mondays," she said. "This livens up the day." Eventually, after hours of negotiation, Brenda Spencer surrendered peacefully. The authorities had managed to convince her to come out of her house without further bloodshed. It was a moment of relief, but the scars left by her actions would never fully heal. In the aftermath of the attack, it was revealed that Brenda had previously shot at the school with a BB gun, causing damage but no injuries. She had been arrested for this crime, as well as for burglary, but received probation. Brenda's probation officer advised that she spend some time in a mental facility to treat her depression, but her father declined, insisting that he could handle his daughter's mental health problems on his own. Tragically, his way of handling the situation was buying his daughter the weapon she eventually used to shoot at the school. In 1980, Brenda Spencer pleaded guilty to 2 counts of murder. Although 9 counts of attempted murder were dismissed, she was sentenced to concurrent terms of 25 years to life in prison. The severity of her crimes ensured that she would spend decades behind bars. To this day, Brenda Ann Spencer remains incarcerated at the California Institution for Women in Corona. Her once infamous name may have faded from public consciousness, but the impact of her actions lingers on. The haunting legacy of "I Don't Like Mondays" took on a life of its own. Bob Geldof, the lead singer of the Boomtown Rats, penned a song with the same title, inspired by Brenda's chilling words. The song topped the charts and received extensive airplay, forever linking Brenda's name to the tragedy she caused. Anthony Haynes.
It was nice, right? I had been anticipating it, kind of excited, waiting on it. As a matter of fact, the night before, I didn't even sleep at all, right? I tried, but I couldn't, right? I was just ready to come out.
Anthony Cardell Haynes, the teenage cop killer, was born on September 12, 1980, in the small town of Oakdale, California. Growing up, Anthony had a troubled childhood, marked by a series of unfortunate events that would ultimately shape his dark and violent path. From an early age, Cardell was exposed to a tumultuous home environment. His parents, John and Lisa Haynes, were known for their volatile relationship, characterized by frequent arguments and instances of domestic violence. This unstable atmosphere had a profound impact on young Anthony, leaving him emotionally scarred and vulnerable. As Anthony entered his teenage years, his behavior became increasingly erratic. He struggled academically and often found himself in trouble with the law. His rebellious nature and propensity for violence quickly earned him a reputation as a troublemaker within the community. One significant event that seemed to have a lasting impact on Anthony's psyche occurred when he was just 15 years old. During a routine traffic stop, Anthony witnessed a fellow teenager being brutally beaten by a police officer. The incident left him with a deep-seated resentment towards law enforcement and a growing desire for revenge. As Anthony's resentment festered, he began to immerse himself in a subculture of violence and criminal activity. He associated with a group of delinquent peers who shared his disdain for authority and engaged in various illegal activities. This toxic environment further fueled Anthony's anger and propelled him towards a path of destruction. In May 1998, Anthony's simmering rage reached its boiling point. Off-duty Houston Police Department Officer Sergeant Kent Kincaid, known for his dedication to serving and protecting the community, unwittingly crossed paths with the vengeful teenager. During an evening out with his wife in a private vehicle, Kincaid suddenly felt something smash against his windshield when he drove past a truck driven by Anthony. Officer Kincaid initially thought it was a rock, but on closer inspection, he quickly realized Anthony had actually fired a shot at them. Even though he wasn't on duty, Officer Kincaid instinctively turned his car around and pursued Anthony until they eventually pulled over alongside each other. Kincaid then stepped out of his vehicle, approached Anthony, who was sitting in his truck, and said, "You hit my window." Anthony replied, "I accidentally threw something at your window." Officer Kincaid then said, "I'm a police officer, let's talk about it." When Kincaid reached for his back pocket, presumably to get his ID, Anthony opened fire, hitting Kincaid in the head before fleeing the scene of the crime. However, Anthony was quickly apprehended after the police were able to trace the truck back to Anthony's father. Anthony later confessed to the murder but claimed he didn't know that Kincaid was a police officer, a major factor in making the murder into a capital crime. Anthony was arrested on May 20th, 1998, just days after the murder. The subsequent trial gripped the community as the prosecution meticulously presented their case against the teenage cop killer. Witnesses testified to Anthony's deep-seated hatred for law enforcement, recounting his previous encounters with the police and his explicit threats against officers. The defense, however, attempted to paint a different picture of Anthony, presenting him as a troubled youth who had been failed by the system. They argued that Anthony's actions were a result of his traumatic upbringing and the lack of proper support and guidance. Despite their efforts, the overwhelming evidence against Anthony proved to be insurmountable. Anthony was eventually found guilty of first-degree murder and was sentenced to death. In the wake of the trial, the community rallied together to support the fallen officer's family and honor his memory. Vigils, fundraisers, and memorial services were held to pay tribute to Sergeant Kent Kincaid's life and legacy. The sense of loss and grief lingered, but the community's resilience and unity shone through in the face of tragedy. His conviction served as a somber reminder of the consequences of violent acts and the importance of upholding the law. The community, scarred by the events surrounding the teenage cop killer, vowed to stand strong and ensure that the memory of Sergeant Kent Kincaid would never fade away. Anthony Cardell Haynes was nearly executed in 2012. However, barely 2 hours before his execution time, the Supreme Court issued a stay over claims that Anthony wasn't well represented when the case first made headlines. Since then, Anthony has filed so many appeals in a bid to regain his freedom, but they have continued to be tossed aside by the court, and nearly 3 decades later, Anthony continues to languish on death row. Christa Pike. Christa Pike's early life was marked by tragedy and abuse from the very beginning. Born on March 10, 1976 in West Virginia, she faced unimaginable hardships. Even before she was born, her mother's drinking during pregnancy contributed to her underdeveloped brain. Christa was born prematurely and immediately given to her grandmother to be raised. Unfortunately, her grandmother was no better than her mother. She was an alcoholic who lived with a man alleged to have molested Christa from a young age. When her grandmother passed away in 1988, 12-year-old Christa was sent to live with her mother, who worked as a nurse. However, her mother showed no signs of motherly love or care. To make matters worse, her mother had a physically violent and abusive boyfriend who took out his anger on Christa. She endured beatings with a belt, and no one stepped in to protect her. The cycle of abuse and neglect that Christa experienced in her early life undoubtedly had a profound impact on her development and mindset. It sets the stage for the tragic events that would unfold later in her life. In 1995, at the age of 18, Christa Pike became involved in a horrifying and brutal murder that would forever change her life. She was part of a group known as the Job Corps Trio, along with her boyfriend, Tatterell Shipp, and another young woman named Shalanda Peterson. Their victim was a fellow Job Corps student named Colleen Slemmer. On January 12, 1995, Pike and her accomplices lured Slemmer to a remote location in Knoxville, Tennessee, under the pretense of a drug deal. Once there, they subjected her to a nightmarish ordeal of violence and cruelty. Pike, Shipp, and Peterson brutally attacked Slemmer, beating her with a claw hammer and stabbing her multiple times. But the horror didn't end there. In a sickening display of sadism, Pike carved a pentagram into Slemmer's chest with a box cutter. According to police reports, Pike kept a piece of Slemmer's skull as a souvenir and even brought it along with her for breakfast the morning after the senseless murder. The sheer violence and depravity exhibited by Pike and her accomplices was beyond comprehension. Unsurprisingly, the murder sent shockwaves through the nation and led to Pike's arrest. She was charged with first-degree murder and faced a highly publicized trial. The evidence against her was overwhelming, and in 1996, she was convicted and sentenced to death, becoming the youngest woman ever to receive the death penalty in the United States. Following her conviction and sentencing to death, Christa Pike's legal battles and controversies have continued to captivate the public's attention. Despite her heinous crime, Pike, along with her lawyer, has relentlessly fought to have her death sentence commuted to life in prison. Over the years, Pike has filed multiple appeals, arguing for a reconsideration of her sentence. She has maintained her innocence, claiming that she was coerced and manipulated by her boyfriend and the influence of drugs at the time of the murder. However, her appeals have been unsuccessful thus far. One of the key points of contention in Pike's case is her age at the time of the crime. Had she been 17 years old instead of 18, the death penalty would have been off the table completely. This one-year difference has sparked debates about the fairness and appropriateness of her sentence. Supporters of Pike argue that she was a victim of her circumstances, having endured a life filled with abuse and neglect. They believe that she deserves a second chance at life and the opportunity for rehabilitation. On the other hand, opponents argue that the brutality and sadism displayed in the murder make her deserving of the ultimate punishment. The legal battles and controversies surrounding Pike's case have brought up debates about the justice system and the ethical penalty for such heinous crimes. As Pike continues to await her execution date on death row, the discussion over her fate rages on. Undoubtedly, these teenage killings have left you shocked to the bones, but enlightened about the tough questions arising from their sentencing. To stay updated on the justice system, click on the card showing on the screen.